Good evening, everyone. I want to take this opportunity to welcome all of us to this month's KMA webinar. You recall that we've been doing this for the last 1 year now, and we purpose to continue doing this on a monthly basis. I want to appreciate the fact that the participation continues to grow. I think now we are at 72. We are expecting more and more people to join. But as we wait for them to join, I want to officially welcome all of us and invite our president, Dr. Ero, to just give us some few welcoming remarks as we proceed. Dr. Karibu.
Thank you, Dr. Baraza, Professor Peter Gishangi, Dr. Flora Karimi from Aphrc, Professor Peter Gishangi, my teacher, all the way from Chihomo, the SG for KMA, Dr. Simon Kigondu, Dr. Paul Yonga, editor for EAMJ, Dr. Chafasto, and Chris Baraza from the Medical Research Committee of KMA. I think today's topic is actually very timely, bearing in mind the aspiration of KMA wanting to be an ethics and research to form an EARC committee, working together with like-minded partners like Aphrc, and also our long history of publishing through our magazine, the EAMJ. So I think it's a timely discussion to have, and especially from a rich guest list from Professor Gishang and Flora Karimi, and I hope they'll be able to share their experience in terms of publishing and medical research. That will go a long way in capacity building at the medical fraternity, especially the doctors within the KMA association, to be able to use their skills to be able to generate evidence for practice of medicine in this country, something that we're not so good at. When we do research, then we find ourselves not publishing in our local journals and preferring to publish in a foreign journal. So I hope today we'll have very enriching discussions, and for me to see how we can be able to generate local data and publish it, so that we can be able to contribute to the scientific community in terms of research. So thank you so much, EAMJ and the Ethics and Research Committee under the leadership of Dr. Chafasto Oboni, all the way from Australia. We hope that you're going to have a very enriching discussion and have clear take-home messages which will help us grow as Kenya Medical Association. So with that, I'd like to officially open this webinar series and hope we'll be able to participate so that we can gain as much as we can. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Baraza.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ere, President KMA. Without really going into a lot of details, I want to go straight to the presenter for today. The first presenter for today is a person very well known to us, Prof. Dr. Peter Gishangi. Prof. Peter Gishangi is an obstetrician, gynecologist, a professor of human anatomy and research, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic Research and Extension at the Technical University of Mombasa, and a visiting professor at Ghent University, Belgium. Prof. Gishangi attained his medical training at the University of Nairobi and earned his PhD in 2004 in a sandwich program between the University of Nairobi and Ghent University, and a Master in Public Health in 2008 from the University of South Africa. He has over 25 years of experience in healthcare and academia in various capacities, including but not limited to teaching, programming, consulting, and clinical research, with a focus on sexual and reproductive health research. In the very fulfilling career an obstetrician gynecologist. Prof. Gishang has assisted many women to bring life to this world, improved women's life, and also witnessed the challenges of this noble responsibility of delivering life and taking care of women's health. Prof. Gishang is an accomplished researcher with 116 publications in PubMed, among others. He's a reviewer for several journals as well as donor agencies. Prof has experience working in different countries in Africa, including Kenya, Ethiopia, Southern Sudan, Tanzania, and Namibia. His current research portfolio includes household survey for performance, monitoring for action, HIV programs addressing key populations, M-Health addressing sexual reproductive health for key population, and adolescents, youths. So I'm very privileged and proud to introduce Prof, who was at some point my supervisor, and welcome, Prof, to share with us your vast experience. Karibu sana.
Thank you, everybody in the meeting, and thank you for the kind words. It's always a pleasure to share my experiences with my colleagues, and I will not shy from sharing that experience. So allow me to then see that I can share my screen with the team. So just give me one moment and I'll be doing that. So, okay, then here. Okay. Stop sharing. I'm about to share the wrong thing. My apologies. So let me get the correct thing I need to share. That's correct. Bear with me one moment, colleagues. I would like to get myself, okay. We had tested this a few minutes ago, but sometimes technology changes. So, okay. Okay. Colleagues, can you see my presentation?
It's not yet come through, Prof.
It's not yet come through.
No.
I'm just wondering because we had it before. Okay, basic files, desktop. It's on my desktop. Okay. Right, one moment. Let me just see whether I can scroll and find it. And if I'm not able to find it, somebody at the journal has it for me.
Yes, Peter should have. Peter, do you have a copy?
Share, sound, optimize. I'm sorry, I can't. I'm not able to find it on my screen right now. So allow me. I don't know what I need to do more, because I must share screen. That's why it should be. Preview, review, webinar. No, it's not. Excel, no. PowerPoint, yes. Should be here. Okay. Are we good there?
Yeah, there you go now. Prof,
okay.
You go. There you
Excellent.
Go. You have it.
Excellent. Thank you, colleagues, and sorry about that hiccup. But this evening, I would like to share with you an overview of scientific peer review. And I must be very clear that I belong to the Technical University of Mombasa for the next, and I think another 2 years. I've been in Mombasa for 3 years. I have a contract for 5 years before I come back to Nairobi. So, and as I was introduced, I'm responsible for academic affairs, research, and extension. So this is the outline of my presentation. I would like to share a few key highlights, and I'm sure my colleague from APHRC might have something similar. So my apologies if our presentations do overlap. But I would like to bring our attention to the fact that publishing has been around with us for quite some time. And indeed, 1323, that was the first recorded publication from somewhere in France. But I would like to draw your attention to 1731, where Medical Essays and Observations was the first fully peer-reviewed publication by the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And that is a critical point because we'll see later on what has characterized paper reviews. And so I would like to bring your attention to, and I invite all of us to read the 1998 publication, volume 75, special supplement, page 10 to 19 of the East Africa Medical Journal. And that takes us a little bit of the history of the journal. And I think we cannot talk about peer reviews and publications without reflecting on our setting, because it's important. 1923, a monthly publication of medical services was started. Couple of years later, it became the Kenya Medical Journal. In 1924, 1926, it became the Kenya and East Africa Medical Journal. And 1930, it became the East Africa Medical Journal. A long history, and I hope all of us in this room can be able to identify with this particular journal and contribute to the improvement of the journal. So what is peer review? I would like to pay attention to the fact that peer review, as designed, as we know it, has been useful in several ways. One is to assess the validity of the data being proposed for publication. It has been very useful in terms of assessing quality and often the originality of the publications. So as a reviewer, you'll be expected at minimum to say something about those three key characteristics. But ultimately, the purpose is here to maintain the integrity of science by filtering out invalid or poor quality articles. And all of us who are actively in the field of research and publishing would appreciate that indeed life is changing quite rapidly. I'll be able to say a few of those things. And the concept of phishing, P-H-I-S-I-N-G, where you from data set, you interrogate the data. Basically, it's data, people tell you can beat up the data and they'll tell you a story. So those kind of things are coming to an end because then you'll be required with time to publish your proposal to really show what is the genesis of the data you're going to be publishing. And therefore, looking at invalid and poor quality articles becomes important. And it is critical that reviewers are able to help the journals and of course the scientific world to be able to do that. If you look at from the publisher's perspective, and the East African Medical Journal is a publisher, one would be as a filter of content. What content do you or are you able to share? Looking at directing better quality articles to better quality journals, and so creating journal brands. And this is important. And the question is, as you create these journal brands, what does it mean? And this is something we need to think about for East Africa Medical Journal. So what are some of the things we have gone through, and what are some of the things we shall be facing in near future? One, if you look at the traditional peer review, what are the characteristics and challenges? I think some of us do remember when we had the opportunity to review papers. It was anonymous. Either the reviewer was unknown to the author, either it was single-brided or double-brided, the author and the reviewer are not known to each other. It will take the journal editor to select the reviewers, and it will remain confidential. Neither the review process nor the reviews themselves will be available, and so decisions being made will remain very obscure. So what are some of the challenges from that kind of a review? Of course, there's a lot of confidentiality in that, but we also note that it seems to be unreliable in terms of failing to detect errors where there are inconsistencies, because as a reviewer, if you misinterpret the data, that's it. There is no opportunity for the author to ever be able to correct or clarify the issues. It would take too long to have the process of review completed, and between submissions could be quite a while. It was unaccountable, and there's therefore neighboring social and publication biases, because it is the word of the only anonymous author. And of course, it was lacking in incentives. The question is why spend my precious time reviewing journals and giving editors my comments. But we'll see that as a result of that challenge, we have now reached a stage where we talk about open reviews. And open reviews, I would say, is a spectrum of different components of how the traditional method of peer review has evolved, where you have open identities of the authors and the reviewers. You can have open reports, and some journals are indeed appending those reports which are available to readers of particular articles. Open participation where community is engaged, open interactions in between the authors and the reviewers, open peer review manuscript where individuals can be able to do that online. And indeed, I will share with you, there are some areas reviewers can, engage as a community. Open final version being, recorded. This is the final version because reviews can continue and improvement can continue, but you have to reach a point where you say, this is where we stop. And there's a concept of decoupled review where the reviewing agency is removed from the reviewer. For example, East African Medical Journal can, contract somebody else to review and only submit the papers which have been reviewed and therefore ready for publication. We see that there are benefits of open review, open peer review. And remember, here is a peer, is another researcher, and it can improve transparency. It can improve accountability because the reviews I make, they must stand the test of time. It reduces bias. I have to be very objective that I am not misinterpreting the data. It reduces inconsistencies because it's a very clear pattern. It's a very clear formula of what you need to do. It reduces time. I cannot be seen to be the one holding a paper for 1 year. It is incentivizing to the reviewers because, as we know, some of us and maybe many people in the room may get certificates of review that the journal is saying you have been our reviewer and therefore you have a certificate to that effect. Universities are also considering, if you have been a reviewer, it also means that you're keeping up to breast or up to date with the current literature, and therefore that can be used for your purposes of promotion. And of course, the feeling that you have wasted your efforts is reduced by open peer review because your work is recognized and therefore you do not see it as though you have wasted your time. And so there are key 4 important areas we need to think about, which are now reality. There are publishers who are publishing platforms, for example, F1000 Research and others. You have independent reviewer services. You just submit your papers there, like Peerage of Science, Pabrons. You submit your work there, it's reviewed. There are review annotations and applications where, for example, ResearchGate, individuals can be able to review from those platforms. Or indeed, you have repositories where papers can be reviewed, and BioRxiv is one of those platforms. And indeed, recently, as you're submitting your papers to the journals, they do ask whether you need to submit your work to some of these platforms. And so there are growing demands. And this is an extract from Ross and Schmidt, 2017, published in PLOS ONE, where individuals, publishers were asked several questions, and you can see the spectrum of responses. About 3,062 persons were asked questions about open review. open discussion between authors and reviews, how many would agree to that? But I would like to say, take you to the next chart, which is how many people of the people interviewed would like to see open data being available. And we see there about 71% and only 13% saying they do not support such a view. The people who are in orange, indifferent, we see very few. Open identity, only about 30% of individuals would say their identity to be known. But this is the reality that sooner than later, all of us will be able to know this is so-and-so who has reviewed my paper. And that, of course, allows transparency. Like I said earlier, you're able to keep it to time so that you don't wait for too long. I did mention the issue of incentivizing individuals. And indeed, once you get your recognition from the journals in terms of certificate or your citation in different platforms, indeed, this can be used for purposes of promotion. And all of us within the university settings and also researchers, remember that even when you're independent researcher, for example, APHRC, your work continues to be recognized because of what you published, the impact journal, the impact factor of those journals, and many other considerations. So it's not in vain that you make sure that you publish and you also contribute the process of peer review. So I cite two publications here, the WIRE Guide on Peer Review, and also I'll touch on +1 before I conclude. But in terms of, I would summarize that all the reviews follow one format, is a funnel, just like the way you have an introduction, which is a funnel, which is a big issue. And here we look at what are the major issues within the publications, because those major issues, for example, if you have a wrong study design, if you wanted to find things over time for a particular population, but you have used multiple cross-sectional design, that will never get you the time relationship in terms of causality. And so when you look at major issues, you look at what are they? State what the severities are in terms of the impact on the paper. You look at the challenges the authors are presenting. Are there challenges about current thinking which are being ignored? Do they have produced strong evidence to prove their case? Have they cited relevant works? Are there major revisions included, required, and what are they? Are there major presentational problems? And sometimes you look at a paper and you say, yes, there are major layout problems or just presentation of the facts. Figures and tables and the language of the manuscript. Are you able to understand a figure or a table without having to read the narrative? So are there ethical issues which may have arisen? For example, if it's not very clear whether, for example, you have included individuals 15 to 18 years, they are not able to give you consent unless they are emancipated minors, and you did not address those matters, then it can be an important ethical question. So minor issues, these are areas or sentences or phrases which are ambiguous. How can this be corrected? Are the references cited properly? Sometimes you find mix up of reference styles. Is it Harvard? Is it Vancouver? Is it APA? Those kind of things. Have you used too many references? Thankfully, some journals restrict that you may not have more than 40 or 50 references, but you may find a very small article and you have 150 publications cited. That is certainly over-exaggeration in terms of citation. And then numerical facts or errors, which you need to address. Tables appropriate labeled. And then you get to, there's one more slide I'm missing there. But certainly you get to other important areas individuals may correct, like grammar and those kind of things. In terms of +1, they have a review template which I'll share before I finish, but you need to look at the organizational structure of the paper. Certainly when you review for a journal, there's always a section where they guide you on what to look for in a paper. And so you can see the outlook or the outline of the journal, and you are able to then look through the paper, and you're able to say, yes, does it follow the outline required? In your own words, are you able to understand what the research question, what the claims they are in? And this is important. If you cannot be able to identify what is it about this paper, what are the conclusion, then you, of course, you have red flags, which then you need to think about. Then you look at the strengths and weaknesses. And overall, for example, when you look at the discussion, it is critically important for authors to highlight what limitations you need to consider when you look at their papers. And if certainly that is not considered, then you may want to think about, are there important components you need to be able to highlight particular limitation. If you look at generalizability, transferability of the information vis-a-vis what you looked at the sample size, then you can raise those questions. So just generally, like I talked about Wheaties publication guide, you have major issues, your minor issues, then you have other points which may make the publication better. But generally speaking, those are not key areas which you consider when you're looking at, is it okay for you to forward this paper for publication? And so it is important to be a reviewer with empathy. However, empathetic as you may be, you need to be critical but constructive. And I would emphasize critical but constructive. We have seen reviewers who, lack of a better word, are literally insulting the authors. And that is unacceptable. And the journals, when they see that kind of your review output, they may never invite you again for a review. But again, you cannot be too flowery when you know that the work is not up to the mark. So that's why you have to be critical, but constructive, particularly where you want the paper to be redone. It is important to do that. It is important to maintain anonymity. Where it's open review, that to be dealt by the journal. But again, you know, in the circle of research, we know sometimes what our points of views are, and we may impose those points of views on papers, which is not acceptable. Meet the deadlines. It is unfortunate sometimes, just because you are too busy, you may miss the deadlines, but please ask your assistant to try and help you to keep the deadlines. It is important, particularly if you are reviewing for students who must fill certain requirements before they graduate. If you delay with their publication, that can be a problem. Again, publication may be time sensitive. If it's a particular information, for example, the early days of COVID-19, and you delay that information for 6 months, then it's not very useful to the scientific world, to programmers, and to anybody who would have benefited from such information. Avoid bias. This is important because the world of research is a very small world. If you're terribly biased against something which is obvious, then it is very possible that your path as a reviewer and the path of the author may be crossing sooner than later. So it is absolutely important for us to remain above board and to be objective as you can be. And sometimes when you review a paper, it may require you to actually go back and review other papers so that you can say, yes, the claims being made here, are they in line with what is expected? And I would tell you that for you to be an effective reviewer, please make sure that you have one quick pass through in terms of reading, so that you get a feel of the paper. Then you come back and read it in details, and then you may do a third read if there are still areas which are not very clear to you. And that way, then you can be as objective, you can be as critical, you can be timely, and you may avoid bias, which then we have seen that can be a challenge for you as an individual, for the journal, and indeed for the scientific community. And with that, I would like to thank you all. And this is a picture of one of the buildings in our campuses in Mombasa. And I invite you, the day you are in the neighborhood of Chuda in Mombasa, please pay a courtesy call to the Technical University of Mombasa. I thank you all. Back to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that very enlightening presentation on, you've taken us quickly through peer review and some of the characteristics and challenges that you encounter when you are having a peer review. Then you've also quickly taken us through open reviews and some of the incentives that individuals get or are entitled to. And then you've lastly taken us through the Willis guide on peer reviews. So with that, I want to quickly move on to the next presentation, and just by introducing our next presenter. Just a minute as I share. So we have our second presenter, Flora Karimi. Flora Karimi is currently works with the African Population and Health Research Center, Aphrc, where she coordinates various research capacity strengthening projects and carries out related research work. More specifically, she manages the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa, CATA, and the Fund Management Program for the Joint Programming Initiative for Microbial Resistance Africa in Africa. She's also a co-applicant in the IDRC, Supported Supervision and Mentorship of Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Postgraduate Training Programs in East Africa project. Flora holds a bachelor, master, and doctorate degree in education with a focus on educational psychology. She has vast experience in higher education, having previously worked in various capacities in East Africa. She previously served as a national technical advisor on higher education, working close with the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, and on World Bank supported higher education projects in Kenya. She has previously served as a higher education administrator, curriculum developer, and lecturer within Kenya. Moreover, she's a higher education quality assurance expert within the East African region. Flora is passionate about research and research capacity strengthening initiatives in Africa. In this respect, she has won grants worth more than $10 million and published more than 10 peer-reviewed articles on higher education, research, and research capacity strengthening initiatives in Africa. With this, I want to gladly welcome Flora to share with us her experience in matters research. Thank you, Flora. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much. I'm getting a comment on my screen saying that you cannot start sharing while the other participant is sharing. I think that's Professor. Professor, maybe you need to stop sharing.
I am not sharing right now.
Okay, the comment has gone. Let me now share. That's fine. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, it's visible. Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning to those from other regions. My name is Dr. Flora Karimi. I work for the Africa Population and Health Research Center, and more specifically in the unit of research capacity strengthening. And I'm glad to be part of this particular webinar. And thank you very much to the organizers who invited me to be part of this webinar. So let me just start by briefly, very briefly, giving us an overview of what Aphrc is all about. So in Aphrc, we believe in transforming lives in Africa. And we do this through generating evidence, strengthening research and related capacities in Africa, research development ecosystems, and engaging policy to inform action on health and development. And in that way, we have three programmatic areas, which touch on research, capacity strengthening, and also policy engagement and communication. Specific to the area where I am working, which is capacity strengthening, we do a lot of capacity strengthening in terms of individual capacity strengthening, fellows, or even working on training programs to be able to strengthen the skills that different individuals have. We also have internship programs, and we have capacity strengthening activities that involve institutions and improving the ecosystem around different institutions so that they can be able to better support those who are carrying out research in those institutions. And thirdly, we are carrying out capacity strengthening activities in the area of systemic changes, touching on the region, touching on national governments, and touching on how to change the continent as a whole. And so having said that, Professor has mentioned earlier, and maybe I'll also ask for your indulgence in this, in the sense that our presentations may very much be alike, our structures very much be alike, but I will try and focus specifically on the angle of you as a researcher or you as an author giving out your work for research, for peer review. And so in that way, then I will try and complement what Professor has provided to us on an overview on the peer review process. So I know he gave a very good introduction in terms of what peer review is all about. And I'll also emphasize on the same and say that when we're dealing with peer review or the peer review process, then we are looking at how do we self-regulate what an author or what a researcher has given to us. And so we'd be interested as peers, as researchers, as academicians who are peers in this area, to look at what another individual or an author has provided and see whether it meets the scholarly kind of standards that we have set up. And so I just want to touch a bit on the criteria of selection of the peer reviewers. So whenever we are thinking of peer reviewers, either as a journal or as an editor, then we are looking for peer reviewers who are experts in the specific field that we are dealing with. And so we would usually encourage anyone who's coming up with an article to be very careful about who or which journal they are sending their work to, because the experts who are within that particular journal will focus on scrutinizing your work in relation to their expertise. We'll also look for scientists who have a general knowledge base. And this is really critical of late, considering the fact that there's been a lot of push towards multidisciplinary kind of research, multidisciplinary kind of work being carried out. And so because of that, we would not necessarily look at specific areas, but one who is able to generally look at the entire base in the research spectrum. We'll also look for individuals who have expertise and competencies in the specific subject area, and look for a range of experts. We'll look for the young, we'll look for those who are upcoming researchers, and also look for those who are quite senior in the fields that are required in this particular review process. Now, Professor touched on this when he was talking about the key considerations that are made in a peer review process. And he took us through 2 journals and their requirements, but I'll just point on highlight some of the general requirements and refer to the fact that any peer reviewer would be looking at the scientific rigor and validity of the science in that particular article or research work that has been done. They will look at the quality of the experimental design. And Professor did take us through the whole area of the experimental design and even the methodology that has been used. So it is upon the peer reviewer to try and identify whether the experimental designs that have been used or even the methodology that has been used is appropriate for this particular, in this particular article. They will also look at the article and determine whether there's any significant whether this particular research work will actually contribute to, in a significant way, to the knowledge base that we have. They'll also be looking at aspects to do with how important the findings are and the originality of the research work that has been given out. In addition to that, the peer reviewer will be looking critically to find out whether there are any scientific errors that have been made, any typographical errors, or even any grammatical errors within the article or within the work that has been presented. They'll be looking out to find out, has the author been able to cite all, or has the author given credit to all relevant individuals? And is it possible that there are some references that have been provided that are not correct, or there are some missing references? So those are some of the aspects that the peer reviewer will be interested in looking at. The peer reviewer will also find out whether there's cohesiveness in the article. When you move from one section to another, are they linked? Are they interconnected? And are they cohesive as you move from one section to another? And finally, the peer reviewer will have that responsibility of giving a recommendation. And there are three kinds of recommendations that a peer reviewer can give. He may either say, or he or she may say that I am accepting, or we accept, or I recommend this particular paper to be accepted. Or he may decide through the evaluation that he has carried out that this particular paper should be rejected. Or he or she may recommend that the paper or the article be revised further before it is published in a journal. And Professor took us through that whole process. Another area which is very common, which is very much alike to what Professor provided to us, is the area of what are the types of reviews that your article can go through. And he mentioned and really went through the whole process of what open review is, what single blind reviews are all about, and what double blinded reviews are all about. I have highlighted maybe some important aspects that we need to consider when we are looking at the open review process. One of the weaknesses of the open review process, and again, Professor mentioned how much the open review process would benefit us even as a whole. But one of the weaknesses that we need to be aware of is the fact that there's a possibility that a peer reviewer who is on in considering the articles that are open reviewed would be biased or would fear to give their their honest view of a particular article because they know the author and they fear to get into a bad rapport with the author. And it is for that reason that in many open review processes, we would not just have one reviewer, but would have a group of maybe 3 or 4, a team of 3 or 4 reviewers who can be able to honestly look at this paper to be able to give an honest overall opinion of a particular paper that has been given by an author. Another aspect that I would want to raise is that on the single blind review, one of the weaknesses that it may have is that of a manuscript taking too long to be reviewed. And one of the reasons that this may take place is because maybe the paper that has been presented is very similar to one that the reviewer is dealing with in terms of a manuscript. And so there is a temptation to delay the review process so that the reviewer's paper can go out before he finishes reviewing this particular author's work. And that's a weakness that is there. But as Professor mentioned before, we need to be very careful if we are going to be dealing with the peer review process, so as to discourage the reviewers from taking too long to review any of the articles or manuscripts that have been given to them. I want to just talk shortly on the peer review process. And I know Professor went through this, but I'll just mention that it is necessary that you as an author focuses on ensuring that after your manuscript has been developed, after you have developed your manuscript, that you engage an internal peer review process so as to be able to refine your manuscript in a better way before it goes for external review. And just touching on the internal peer review process, I want to just give a case of Aphrc, or the African Population and Health Research Center, and just touch on some of the ways in which we have tried to improve the quality of the research work that is leaving Aphrc for purposes of peer review. And so one of the aspects that we encourage our researchers to go through is that of ideation. I know one can ask themselves whether ideation is really a peer review process, but if you think of it, the fact that you are sharing your idea with different people and they are able to interrogate your idea and give you ideas on how to improve it is indeed a first stage towards peer review, especially the internal peer review process. Secondly, we encourage our researchers to consider collaborative rather than single authorship kind of articles. And as many would say, if you are working as a team, then you will go far. But if you're working as an individual, you will go fast, but you may not go too far. And so we encourage our researchers to work together, and through the collaborative work that they are carrying out together and coming out with this particular article, then they are able to review sections that have been carried out by their colleagues. And again, that is still part of the internal peer review process. We also have opportunities whereby our researchers and different individuals can be able to attend different trainings in which we will take them through how to write a scientific article. And through this process, we will expect the individuals or the participants to come up with different sections of their manuscripts or of their articles and have them interrogated within the training by different individuals. This could be in form of sessions that we'll create for them to present their work and thereafter it is interrogated, or it could be in the form of creating what we call manuscript clubs, whereby we put the different participants in small teams and have them share their manuscripts and have the different teams interrogate the manuscripts that have been presented by their colleagues. Or it could be through approaching an individual or even a facilitator during one of the research capacity strengthening activities so that they can be able to have a second eye or a third eye to review this individual's work before the external review process is considered. Another way that we encourage internal peer review processes is through encouraging protocols to go through the institutional ethical review committees. And before any work goes out for external, to the external ethical review committees, then internally, we have had a process where the protocol is reviewed by the committee and the protocol has been refined internally before it goes to an external body. And fourthly, we have what we refer to as brown bags, whereby any researcher who intends to send their work out as either an article or in any form would be encouraged to make a presentation to the entire staff of Aphrc and would have a discussion and interrogation and feedback given to the individual so that they can be able to refine their work before that is taken for external review. Now, on the external review process, and Prof touched on this, I recall him mentioning the fact that it can be a tedious process and it has different stages. And so we start all the way from the manuscript submission being made. We go on to the general review that is done by the editor to find out whether what you have given out as your manuscript really follows what is expected or what has been put out as the requirements for this particular journal. And so your work can either be rejected at that moment or it is taken further to the peer review process. Now, as I mentioned before, the peer review process, within the peer review process, you can either get a recommendation of accept this particular journal, this particular article with major corrections or with minor corrections, or reject it all over again. Now, what we need to focus on as researchers is to ensure that we minimize this particular cycle of your work going over and over and over again through the review process before it is accepted and produced for publication. And so it is very critical that you ensure that your internal reviews are quite tight, so that by the time your work is going for external review, then it will take a shorter time for your work to be externally reviewed. In other words, the amount of time that you take with internal review processes will correspond to the amount of time that will be taken in the external peer review process. So bottom line, let us work keenly on ensuring that what we have as our manuscript is of good quality, so as to reduce the length of time that is taken for peer review processes. Now, Professor touched on this when he was talking about the benefits of the peer review process. And many would ask, why does our work need to go for a peer review process? The first aspect, and Professor touched on this, is that we need to uphold high standards of scholarly communication. We also, through this process of peer review, then the authors, the reviewers, and the editors get an opportunity to discuss and further discussions on any particular research field and topic. Again, as Professor mentioned, it is a good space to be able to validate the work, the articles that we have, and also to look at the originality of the articles that we have. And fourthly, it supports and maintain, it helps us to support and maintain integrity and authenticity in advancing the science that is going out and in filtering the poor quality articles that may be presented. Professor also talked about the publications and the benefit that peer review has to the different publishers. And I've just put up some of the aspects that he raised when he was discussing, aspects to do with the quality of the journal. The peer review process helps us to refine the journal and to refine what is going out in terms of the work from our research, from our articles that we are presenting. But I want to specifically touch on the benefits that peer review has to you as an author and you as a researcher. One of which is through the peer review process, then you get some constructive and detailed feedback from the external individuals. And so through that, you are able to refine your work more, and you're able to remove any errors that may be in your work, or to minimize the errors in your work. You're also able to meet the high standards of your specific discipline, and you're able to provide or to produce research work which can be able to advance the field that you are focusing on. In general, the peer review process will help to improve the quality of your articles. And so it is also a benefit to you as an individual. Prof mentioned some of the critics, and I will not focus too much on them, of the peer review process. One of them being the fact that the peer review process may take longer than expected. And again, in some cases, it may lack the rigor that is required, especially in a case whereby you have taken your work for peer review in a journal that may not be credible. And so in such cases, you may find work that does not have the rigor that is expected from the peer review process. Again, in some cases, you'll find that you may find some biases, even in the peer review process as a whole. Some individuals claim that the peer review process can also stifle innovation in experiments, in the sense that one may not be able to fully expose themselves, and they feel that the peer reviewers may be hindering them from exploring areas that they feel are innovative. I talked about plagiarism and the possibility of plagiarism, and also the fact that in some fields, you may find that you don't have enough competent peer reviewers for the vast number of papers that are coming out in that area. And so when I hear of the East African Medical Journal coming up and wanting to establish itself as a review team, then this encourages me, because I'm sure you will put in place different peer reviewers. You will go around and identify peer reviewers who can be able to support this process. Now I'm coming to the end, but before I come to the end, I just want to touch on you as a researcher, you as the author. What do you then have to do? Having gone through this whole peer review process discussion, number one, you need to do your groundwork very well. You need to be able to identify the relevant journals that are related to your article. You would not want to put in your article in a particular journal and then it's rejected based on the fact that it was inappropriate, or even the fact that the peer reviewers who had been identified are not able to identify with what you have put in your article. Secondly, you need to identify which are these credible journals that we need to think of. And we have different websites that would give us an indication of what the credible journals are. I've just given one, which is a Think, Check, and Submit journal that you can also refer to. You also need to do your groundwork with respect to which are credible journals and which are the predatory journals. And again, you could still get information from the Think, Check, and Submit website on that, or even from the Bell list that you can easily have access to. Fourthly, you need to find out this journal that I want to have my article published in. What are the instructions? What do I need to know about this journal? What is it that they require? What are those requirements that they have put in place? Also understand the journal that you are approaching. What kind of journal what kind of peer review process do they go through? Is it single? Is it double? Is it open peer review process? Then thereafter, develop your manuscript. And Prof did go through what are the requirements that are required in the development of your manuscript. Then finally, make sure that it is reviewed internally. First, review it as an individual, and then subject it to some internal peer review process. As I come to the end, I have just made an indication of some of the pointers that we have when you're considering what journals may be predatory. And so I have just put down some of the aspects that we need to consider as pointers. And finally, let me say thank you for the opportunity that you have given me to just take you through a glimpse of what
Thank you so much, Flora, for that very precise presentation.
The peer review process. Hello? Hello?
Hello, Flora, you can hear us?
Yes. Hello?
Hello, you can hear us?
Hello. Yes, I had, did you hear me ending? I hope I got to the end.
Yeah, we've gotten you to the end.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies for that mishap. We are actually on top of the hour, and I would wish to kindly ask Dr. Kigondu to proceed with the next stage of question and answer. Dr. Karibu.
Thank you very much.
Kigondu, you're on mute. Or is it my audio?
Oh, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Loud
Thanks.
and clear. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Thanks. So yeah, we had asked. Thank you very much for the presentations. I think they were brilliant, and we had asked people to put their questions on the chat, and I have two, and I'll start with the first one without too much waste of time. Some manuscripts take too long to be published by the East African Medical Journal. What could be the problem? Some have taken more than 6 months, and I am very, very happy to have the East African Medical Journal boss, Dr. Paul Yonga, and also who can take that question. Paul Yonga, why are your manuscripts taking long?
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Excellent. So thank you for that question. And I think just to start things off is just to make our audience maybe aware of how the review process at the East African Medical Journal takes place. The first thing that we normally do is that the timeline from the submission of a manuscript for potential consideration for publication, anywhere from submission to approval within the East African Medical Journal takes anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks. So we normally anticipate that by the time the article has been submitted, anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks, there has been some correspondence between the reviewers and the author, because each manuscript is submitted to a minimum of 2 reviewers. One reviewer needs to be a subject matter, a subject expert on the, an expert on the subject matter. And then the second reviewer is really a person who is an expert on the methodological issues as well as the biostatistics. So in between 8 to 12 weeks, these 2 reviewers normally need to look through the manuscript in great detail and communicate with the author. And then at the final stage is whether the manuscript is being accepted or being rejected. Now, in a few instances, which I may agree, is that there are some instances where a manuscript, I think 1 or 2 manuscripts, have slept on the desks of reviewers and unfortunately bypassed the editorial board. And so I think it is until when the author gets back with our administrative assistant is when we realize that a manuscript has been delayed with one of the reviews. And partly some of the reasons have actually been raised during this presentation. You find that an article debates so much with the reviewer, and unfortunately a lot of these processes still take place manually. So it is very likely sometimes it may also bypass the editorial board, which is something I must say I'm very apologetic about. And those are systems that we are trying to change. And one of the things is really automate the process of review. And I think that is one of the processes that you're going through to make sure that those timelines, the 8 to 12 weeks, is strictly adhered to, so that we don't have delays of even more than 3 months where a response has not been put on whether to accept or reject. So it's something that we're still working on. And to those manuscripts that I know that have delayed, as an editor-in-chief, we've taken remedial actions to make sure that the reviews are expedited and authors are informed of the progress and the eventual outcome of the publication. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yonga. The second question comes from Laban Onono. Titles can be junior, however, experiences and expertise can surpass titles. For me, the question is, what is their capacity to deliver more than titles per se? Does anyone have a comment on titles? Prof. Gishangi?
Yes.
Karimi?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kigodu, and thank you, Raban, for that question. Yes, indeed, a title of being junior does not mean that you do not have the capacity to deliver what is required. It only means that you may have limited experience in terms of what you have gone through. But over time, you appreciate that what you'd see as a novice researcher is very different from what you'll see as a seasoned researcher. And that is the bottom line. So the issue there is not because you are junior, it's just because of the content in terms of experience, how much you have had in terms of experience. So that becomes then an important area regarding what are you able to do. My take would be that as individuals grow up in the field of research, it will be important that they get their hands held by somebody else who has more experience in these matters, and therefore they can gain the capacity. And I would say one of the things to do is a meeting like this. You have picked several issues from my presentation from my colleague Flora, and that can then go a long way in making you a better reviewer, even also as a better publisher. So it is a question of how much have you gone through, not the question because you are young in terms of years. You could still be old, but still be a novice in terms of the things you're discussing today. That would my take, Dr. Kigondu. Back to you.
Thank you. Karimi, do you have a take on that?
Yes, I'll add on to what Prof has said and mention the fact that, yes, titles are not that of importance, but it is what is delivered that is of importance. You can find a senior researcher or a peer reviewer who does not deliver on time because maybe they are so busy, or they are not that critical in the document because they are so busy. Yet you can find a young person who's enthusiastic and who's able to critically look at an article and work on it accordingly. However, as Professor has said, it is very necessary, and I think many publishers, many journals do this, that you pair an upcoming peer reviewer with a seasoned one. And through that, then there's a lot of mentorship that takes place. And as the upcoming individual continues peer reviewing, then, under the mentorship of one who's seasoned, then they grow to be stronger and stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those answers. I think we are doing well. Anonymous attendees, will these slides be available and accessible online? I missed the start. And as the Kenya Medical Association, after each webinar, posts its all presentations on its YouTube page, and these can not only be accessible, but they can be shared with those who did not attend. An anonymous attendee asks, does EAMJ send applications of becoming a reviewer for their journal, and how is this done? I see Professor Okeo on the line. Professor Okeo, does EAMJ send application of becoming a reviewer for their journal, and how is this done?
Good evening, Simon. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Professor Gichangi, and thank you, every participants. I'm sorry, I'm having a network problem. When it rains this side and it is windy, power goes off and connection become a challenge. that proposal of pairing seasoned and young reviewers is an excellent suggestion. Gosh, I wish why we have not worked on it. I think it's Simon is for us to we'll work with Miriam to pick it up together with the board. It's an excellent suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I work a lot with the EAMJ editorial assistant, and I think at EAMJ we are actually looking for reviewers. So anyone who wants to be a reviewer can actually send an application or an expression of interest to the EAMJ and become, that will be vetted by the board and they can become a reviewer. There is a question on Samuel Kapinga says some manuscripts are presented as copy and paste of the dissertation / thesis work. The errors are very many and clearly evident that others did not go through the manuscript as a team before submission. How can this be sorted out? We'll have a comment from Professor Gishang, then Karimi, then the EAMJ team. Professor Gishang, have you seen manuscripts which are copy and paste dissertations with many errors?
Thank you. And my colleagues, please bear with me because I'll say as it is. When you see that kind of a problem, there are several failures or there are several levels of failure. One is probably at the level of the student who may have failed to consult with the supervisor. But you also know that there are students who defy the supervisor's guidance and do it their own way. And so that is that level of failure. Second level of failure could be at the level of the supervisor who may have let the student go their own way without giving guidance. And that is a correctable problem because you only need to go back to your supervisor and be able to work with the supervisor. The third level of failure is what we call the harder to get your work published so that you can qualify either for your master's or PhD. And Karimi did mention about predatory journals. Predatory journals are journals you publish, you submit your work in the morning, and in the afternoon you have a letter of acceptance, and you pay your 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000, whatever amount of money they charge you. And indeed, by tomorrow you have your paper published. And therefore, you can submit your entire thesis and it will be published as a paper. And I've seen such kind of publications. But unfortunately, that will not be accepted by institutions which look at veracity of your publication and the contribution of your publications to science. And therefore, you'd have wasted your time and you have lost your money. And some of those journals you publish in the morning, next week you look for that website, it doesn't exist. And so people have to be careful about those kind of things. So if you follow the guidelines and every journal worth its salt or what its value will give instruction to authors. They'll give you a structure, which if you follow, you can never lift your entire thesis and publish it as a paper. So my take it, let's be guided. Let's ask the senior persons, the persons who are growing this field of research, mentor our students, mentor our colleagues, so that they do not make such scientific errors, which are obvious. And sometimes it's painful when you see a senior colleague and their name is on a paper published in a predatory journal or predatory article, and you're asking yourself, surely something must have gone wrong somewhere. That's my take, and my apologies if I have said something which is not very palatable to some of us. Back to you, Kigondu.
Karimi, what's your take?
I will I just want to agree with what Prof has said, and just to put it as the whole issue is on the rigor of writing the manuscript peer reviewing, the supervision of the manuscript and peer review of the manuscript. I'm just summarizing what Prof has said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Yonga, you want to comment?
Yeah. So I think for the East African Medical Journal, I think this is something that we've noted very. I think there are few manuscripts where you find that really the author has not taken time to really interrogate what the instructions to authors are. In fact, that is what I would, if there's any take-home message, in addition to what our presenters really have presented to us, I think as a journal, one of the things that we'd want to plead with authors is before you submit any work to the journal, please take some time, even if it's just 1 or 2 hours, to critically read through the instructions to authors. Because unfortunately, sometimes you find when a paper is brought to, lands on the EAMJ desk and is submitted to a reviewer, one of the things that happens is that it is first screened for whether instructions were actually followed. Now, if instructions were not followed, in the East African Medical Journal, unlike other journals, we tend to be quite lenient. We actually write back to the author to make sure to tell them that they really read the instructions to the authors. In some other journals, such manuscripts are outrightly rejected just because you did not take time to read. But in the East African Medical Journal, I think as a board, we've tried to be as lenient as possible to try and accommodate as many manuscripts to be evaluated. And so the onus now on the author is just to take that bit of time and courtesy to really respect the instructions that are posted on the EAMJ website, because they are very clear on what instructions are supposed to be followed in terms of how you reference your work, the word count, and how you structure your article, the number of tables, the number of figures. All that is very well detailed on the East African Medical Journal website. So maybe if the authors can take a bit of time to read through the instructions, then it becomes minimal. The back and forth becomes minimal, and we really concentrate on reviewing the science that is being presented for potential publication. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm seeing a lot of interest in the Kenya Medical Medical. Thank you very much. Nick Chebsi has said about training and the younger professionals, say less than 5 years, who are struggling with
Dr. Kigondo, your audio is breaking up. I don't know if it's just me.
Yeah, it's breaking. I'm also.
Dr. Kigondo, can you hear us? While we are waiting, I see a hand raised up by John Karanja. We might just take one live question. I know we have gone over time as we prepare to wind this up, and let Dr. Kigondo, if you can hear us. John Karanja, you can please ask your question. I see you have your hand raised up. You can unmute and ask your question. Can't hear John Karanja as well. Is Dr. Kigondo back?
That I think it's
your audio, Doc, is still breaking up.
And haven't
Dr. Kigondo, sorry, I'm just not getting you. Your audio is quite breaking up a bit. I'll just hand over back to Dr. Chris Baraza, who will lead us to the next stage.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Obonyo.
Am I audible?
Yes, although you are still breaking, Dr. Kigondu. Can you hear us, Dr. Kigondu? All right, so I think that brings us to the end of the presentations and question and answer session. I want to appreciate all those who have been around. But as I do that, I want to welcome Prof. Okeo to just give us our final remarks before we call it a day. Prof, karibu sana.
Thank you. And as I said in a previous meeting, the ultimate goal of what we are doing here and what we do in scientific writing and publishing is to put out quality evidence, new knowledge that can inform the practice of healthcare. That goal is contributed to by all of us, right? Starting from the author, the supervisors, the editors, the reviewers, and the publishing setting. And it is the quality. We strive for excellence. We never quite get to the end of it. It's something we work on one paper at a time, one moment to the other, correcting each other, pointing it out where we can add a bit of quality here and there. And what we are touching on, especially in terms of the last comment, is that how credible do us as individuals, being part of society, what value do we put on credibility? That what makes us desist from copy pasting, makes us desist from plagiarism, make us, as a reviewer, make us allocate adequate time to pick out this copy pasting and plagiarism. And I have to say, if someone has read East African Medical Journal and has come across such shortcomings, it's an indictment of us as reviewers and even as a board. So we just need to point it out, be systematic about it, be objective about it, correct where we can, each and every moment that it happens. I want to finish by thanking Professor Gishang for and other keynoters this evening for making that valuable knowledge, which is we cannot pay adequately for it. A lot of reviewing and improving work in scientific writing and publishing is considered charitable. The moment we start putting value to it and we say, okay, that we need to reward reviewers and publishers for work that does not have plagiarism and doesn't have copy pasting, then we miss the point. It's for us to just be alive at every moment when it occurs, pick it, and correct it for the next writer and next reviewer. Thank you very much, Mariam, the editor-in-chief, for doing the background work that makes this evening possible. And thank you, Simon, for steering the meeting. I had a problem getting onto the platform, but I see that the teamwork that was alive was able to keep it live. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Prof, for your final comments and remarks. I want to call it an evening. We are 30 minutes beyond the estimated time. Just to mention that we still continue having our discussions. The third Wednesday of every month, we purpose to ensure that we have very, very credible people to come and present. May I thank Prof. Gishang once more and Flora for the wonderful presentation that you made, and kindly note that we'll be able to send you the presentation on your emails. Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.